Hi, I'm Shawn Douglass, an actor and director in Chicago, Illinois, and also a member of the theater department faculty at Northwestern University. And this is An Actor's Arc. In this episode, the outstanding Lisa Tejero shares her artistic journey that began in the Midwest and has grown into a career reaching across the United States. Hi, Lisa Tejero. Welcome to An Actor's Arc.
Hi, Shawn. Thanks for having me. And before we start, I want to give land acknowledgement to the tribes of the Tacoma and the Umpqua from out here in Ashland, Oregon.
So that's where we're talking to you from.
That's where I am now.
Terrific. One of many places you've been as an actor, which I'm sure we will get to as we go through our journey with you. What was the impulse, or when did you first know that you had an actor inside you waiting to step out?
I would say my impulse was probably within the family. My brother, who's 7 years younger than me, and I put together a skit once, and for some reason, my mother loved it, and it was the funniest thing. We were like, I don't know, I was like 12. He was very young. We were both very young, and we would back into a room and go, whose shoe is that? Whose shoe is that? And then we'd circle each other and bump into each other a la Abbott and Costello style and go, and run out of the room. And it was, so I think that was my first impulse of storytelling. And then it sort of became a bane of my existence, because then you were dragged out to dance for grandma and do it for every dinner party that your parents had.
And was it the same routine, or did the routine grow over time?
Oh, I bet even then there was some hamming going on, that there was like, oh, let's dig deeper into that. That gets an audience response. Laughing, that I think we did refine the storytelling of, and I'm kind of impressed when I think about it. And I've never told this story before. That's interesting. It's because you asked the detailed question of impulse, right? Which is a very good director and actor thing we dwell in the nuances. So the impulse for acting is a very interesting one for me to reflect on, because I always answered the question of, well, in high school I switched acting teachers. I thought I was going to be an artist and go into graphic design. I had this whole life planned out in my head of what it was going to be, and the art teacher I loved got pregnant my senior year and took a sabbatical, and her replacement was not a big fan of my work. And all of a sudden, and I'm very grateful for it, because I don't know that my drawings were anything special. I think there was always that actor impulse inside me, that maybe it's not separate from the creative impulse. It isn't, right? So Linda Denker, who I took speech tournament with, and I really enjoyed those classes in her, and she really encouraged me. And next thing I know, I auditioned for a conservatory, didn't even know what a conservatory was. And that was sort of the path that started me on it. Was oddly a sort of sidestep. Like, it really was like, well, I'm not enjoying this as much. Oh, let me do this. Oh, I'm winning all these tournaments. Oh, okay, let me do this. Let's see what this is. And I had such a limited view of I had no idea what I was getting into.
Well, nothing encourages us like success, right?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess it was success, but it also sort of felt simultaneously like failure for me, because I was failing at what I thought I was going towards. So who in their right mind makes acting their backup plan?
And so you had no acting experience or performance experience in high school? You were mostly doing speech tournaments and that sort of thing?
Yeah, primarily. There were a few, I grew up in St. Charles, Missouri, and or that's where that portion of my life was. I guess I've always been a traveler. You mainly had a lot of agricultural clubs. There were a lot of farmers, freaks, and jocks. That was sort of your three breakdowns of the group, and there was not a lot of art. There was like very little. Like I do remember, like I think there were a couple plays, and I was part of them, kind of. Like I drew the program and did the costumes for one, and I think I was in two small roles. But it was mainly the camaraderie of the speech tournament of forensics, of because you would rehearse a lot, you would spend a lot of time, you would travel to places, and I think I'm wondering if that was also sort of the beginning of me really becoming an adrenaline junkie in that way. And I mean that I think a lot of actors have a bit of that, because you risk a lot when you go out in public sometimes,
Sure.
for us to step on stage every night, assuming we're not going to do some sort of it's like, please God, don't let me do a major fuck up tonight. Don't let me hurt anyone. That's always sort of a possibility, more so than if I were doing something else. And there is something very physiological about performing. Like we really you're very alive, because your blood is pumping, your mind is going, like you are living life very much on an edge, because you're managing who you are and who this other possible thing is, and then incorporating the ever moving landscape of who you're working with, or what the show is, or what the audience is, or whatever that moment is. There's a lot going on and to do it at its best is just to fall and relax into it. But it takes a while to get to that. And in answering this, I'm going, oh, these tournaments sort of got me set up for that rush of adrenaline you would get even for competing, So the diversion into acting came from the sense of failure of going forward with and honestly, I look back on stuff and it's like, I was not bad, but I don't know if I could have made a living at it.
Well, we're glad that you chose the path you chose.
It chose me, I think, but sure. Yeah.
And so what conservatory, and a conservatory is a professional training program for actors. Where did you end up?
St. Charles girl, went to St. Louis, Missouri, Webster Conservatory. And it was mainly because my parents, that's also where a lot of my love and my interaction with the world is through the arts, through creativity. And I attribute all of that. I'm very lucky that my parents valued that. It defined their relationship. He was a doctor, she was a nurse. He was from the Philippines, she was from Southern Virginia. And East met West in St. Louis. And they would paint together. Like my dad had a kiln, like we did batiks, like there was always art. Like we created together as a family. I just thought it was normal. I remember a friend coming over in college and I said, hey, do you want to finger paint? And I pulled out her stuff and she was like, who does this? So as much as I think my father really wanted me to pursue a medical profession, they also understood the artistic impulse I followed, because it is what they put in me and it's their own, yeah.
And so
so they would take me to the theater, St. Louis Repertory, what was then the Loretta Hilton. For my senior year of high school, they bought me a subscription. And so I went to, so I was looking, I was like, oh, this place has an acting program called Webster Conservatory. I think I saw it in a program. And there was always, like, my mom was sort of I would say frustrated actor. She was a high school actor, but then, became a nurse and then became a mother. And I think she, hence the woman who always said, do the shoe bit. I think that spoke very much to a side of them.
At Webster, what was that experience like for you? How did that change and broaden your horizons from from what was a fairly, sounds like a pretty limited background, right? As a young person.
I think I was luckier than most that my parents exposed me to a lot of theater.
Mm,
Like they bought me a subscription. And even before that, we would go to the Muni. My dad loved to go to the free seats at the very top. And, St. Louis in the summer, it's like you're just a sweating mess. But you would get to see Mitzi Gaynor and all sorts of really great old musicals. And so all that was already in my head from like 5 or 7 on. Like
mm,
it was just what they did. So then we were brought along. But Webster definitely focused me in terms of what this was going to take. I think my idea of it was very, very much of the age I was at the time, which was, well, this is fun. I see this and I love the romantic idea of this. And, um, but the codification of a conservatory, which is, your first year, you don't perform. And they sort of, in a weird way, it's an odd actor boot camp, like they break you down in terms of uh, your body, of like how you hold you pay attention to what that is so you can get to a neutral body, so you can create and embody a character. I mean, that's very old school conservatory training that I went to, which is very rigorous and very good. I've since, and even during it, I think I question uh, the necessity and of it being of paying that much for that in a
mm,
career that this is not something you want to start into going with debt, because it's going to take you a while to pay that off. And if you can take that stress off the table sooner, you just have a longer trajectory into whatever it is you want to do and explore, and how it gives you a bit of freedom of how you want to do that. So I was
yeah.
very lucky that my father paid for college,
Mm,
um, and so I didn't have that debt. And in the midst of it, I was like, I don't know that we've got voice and speech, which is great. All the basics is really good. And then like your second year you can act, and then third year you're always doing, and you're constantly, like, you were from 9 to 5, and then you would rehearse and do tech. It was it was a hardcore program for 4 years. And at the time they had cut, so after the second year, you know your class was dwindled, so there's a lot of stress of that. I just don't know that I think you can get some very strong actors out of those programs, but I don't know how practical it is for the everybody. There's great programs you can do, and a lot of this is learning it uh, as you go too. But it really helps to have a structure. I know there's a lot of summer programs that sort of do the 4 years of what I experienced in 3 months, but they sort of lay out, these are things you should be doing.
mm,
And so it opened up my world as to how much work this was going to be. And it uh it was college, so you're growing up as a person.
right.
And you're right, I had a very sort of flat image of what theater was. It was through, I think the very first show I had done, other than the shoe skit, was South Pacific. I was 10, 11,
Mm,
and the high school in Mosinee, Wisconsin, small town, they were doing a production of it, and my brother and I were brought on as the kids at the very beginning. Dites-moi pourquoi.
oh, sure.
Yeah, and so that was probably my first show. And then I did something when I was 14 at the college in St. Charles, which was Trojan Women, which was like, we were caked in mud. It was the 70s. It was very gritty. And I was like 13. But I had started, my mom wanted to do it. She wanted to be that actor, and she got there and she made me come along to audition with her. And we went to a few rehearsals, and then she dropped out. I don't even remember. And then I was still doing it. That was sort of experimental, which is what I think my first year at Webster showed me.
Mm,
Uh, and I think a pivotal point for what the type of theater I have pursued since was, um, I think it was theater West, no, what was it? Theater history. And he had shown a film, it was actual projector, of The Serpent, which was a creative piece, an ensemble piece by Joseph Chaikin's Open
Living theater?
living theater, living theater.
Uh-huh.
They came from open theater, but yeah, living theater is the serpent, and it blew my brain. It was like I didn't know theater could do that. I thought of theater as a very like as entertainment, and
Mhm.
seeing it sort of broken up and in black and white, and these actors doing physical things together, and you know, doing theatrical movements of like when I still, 30 years later, I remember when Cain kills Abel, the gesture. And at the time also, one of the great things of going to Webster was I was exposed to the campus. Well, actually, the theater is on the campus of Webster Conservatory. So you have a lot of professional shows that you get to see constantly. You actually work in them. Sometimes you understudy them, so there was a nice sort of access to really good professional theater, particularly of the time. And uh, Timothy Neary was doing a production of Buried Child, I think my freshman or sophomore year. And Ray Berry was in it, John Spencer. I was one of Holly Hunter's first show. Um,
Hmm.
and the to be able to be in the audience, to like, you would see shows like that, and I saw that show like 4 or 5 times, and what a privilege to be able to do it and to sit somewhere different, and then to be able to talk to them afterwards in the hallway. uh, it, it really changed. I'm very lucky that I landed where I landed, because I think it set the stage for what it is I do now, even though I don't think a conservatory is particularly the best way to do what I did. I overdid it like everything else.
Did you feel prepared? Did you
Oh,
feel scared or complete or incomplete as an artist? Do you remember? Can you cast your mind back there?
oh yeah. Uh, yes. It's interesting because I answered sort of the philosophical point. Now we'll go into some of the nitty gritty, right? This was early 80s. It was a conservatory art. My class was very ethnic for the time, but we weren't cast hardly at all. Most of us. I
You
think they
weren't
were trying
cast?
something. No, I was not cast pretty much my entire 4 years there. There were things you would do. You would like, there was no acting except you did a lot of showcases your first year, and then there were like 3 spaces. There was like a main stage space, and then sometimes there were like student directed things that would happen in the every Tuesday space. And so there was rotating things of different design and support, and some of them were just sort of like more showcase stuff, 45 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And I did a lot of those. I was the queen of the showcase, which I think in a weird way was kind of great, because I was doing a deep dive into a lot of character stuff. And it was a very painful time. And I don't think I even really recognized it as much as I do now, in terms of, because it just simply was my life being ethnic, being
Mm.
multicultural, that I had some opportunities for me, but particularly early on and in college, there was just no one knew what to do with me. And for a lot of my classmates, and we were mainly women, and for some reason I just was never cast in anything big. A lot of nice, very small things, but nothing that in the hierarchy, particularly of the conservatory, was barely cast at bare minimum. And in those shows that I was Miss Gilchrist in The Hostage, so I got my Irish dialect on. And you know and she was lots of fun, and I enjoyed being a part of that piece. But people were doing Kate, Taming of the Shrew, like that was their senior work, and
Right.
I I wasn't being asked to do that. It was frustrating. What it really undermined my self-confidence. I
Mm.
really was not sure what was ahead of me. So when you're talking about what what did you do next? So that was the backstory of where I came from, was this sort of um, and I felt so unseen. It was amazing how unseen I felt there. Now there were people who did see me, and actually I still work with a lot of those people. When I was done, I thought about quitting at one point, but I decided, I don't want to start a life of of just dropping out. I have to get through it. It's like 2 more years, see where you are. And so just just get your degree. And then I decided to, I was afraid I was just going to end up doing South Pacific for the rest of my life,
Mm.
or just the girl who could, the Asian exotic who would do that. And I was like, I really don't know what's out there for me. But I had seen and had been doing this sort of grittier theater. And one of my teachers was, at the time, was up in Milwaukee at Milwaukee Rep and told me about this internship called the Lab. And one of the things you did also was you not only interned for the theater, you would also very much be, it was a laboratory of creating work and still training. And I loved that. Basically what I loved was training. And that was another reason not to quit, because I really love learning. And I think a lot of actors do. It keeps us as perpetual students. We're always having to learn something from outside ourselves. So we're very engaged in life in that way. And our barn doors are wide open. And I'm so lucky that I got to lead the life I did, because I look at everything because it can come into play in what I do. And I decided to, also that it was important to live abroad for a year. So I was like, I will go live abroad in the Philippines. Let's go to the Philippines. That's where my dad's from. I don't really know anything that much about the culture. So it's sort of putting me outside my comfort zone. But my parents are like, we think there's going to be a revolution. And, I was actually, for my graduation present, I had asked, people ask for big things, small things, trips, cars. I was like, I'd love to do this workshop, this movement workshop in Elkins, West Virginia. And it's a mime and clown festival.
Wow.
And I did that for a couple of weeks. So I was in Elkins, West Virginia. I'd made these big decisions. I was at this workshop and I got a letter from John Dillon, the artistic director, saying, thank you for rejecting us. Because I'd said, I'm going to go to the Philippines. Thank you very much for your internship. And he was like, but I wanted to cast you in Top Girls. So please reconsider. I mean, I really want to work with you. And the same day I got a phone call, payphone. This is how 1984. And it was my parents saying, we've decided you shouldn't go to the Philippines. We hear there's going to be a revolution. I was like, okay, it looks like I'm going to Milwaukee. So I did a season in Milwaukee. I was in Milwaukee for a year. Then I went to the Philippines when there was a revolution. While I did a season with the Philippine Repertory. I sang with the rock band, which is hilarious because I really don't sing. I did voiceover work. I did, I came back and thought I would end up in New York or LA, but I had been so far away from my family. And I think the a revolution will do this to you. You see tanks and you see guns and you see soldiers, and you have an appreciation for your family in a way that is palpable. So I didn't want to be as far from them. I was like a year, so let me go to Chicago. I get a letter from, I think it was Nick Faust, my teacher who brought me to Milwaukee. He was then working down at Court Theater and was doing a production with Nick Ruddle of The Oresteia. And
Court Theater in Chicago.
Yeah, within a month. And literally, I'd only been back in the States about 6 months. And I was in Chicago. And it was going to be this sort of holding ground until I decided where I was going to go, which coast, where I could make a living. And what's nice is I've set my bar very low of success, which is like, if I make a living at this, I'm good. So I've been good. It's been slim, but it's been good. And Chicago, we were there about the same, we got about the same time. 86 was when I got there. Holy cow. What I thought the serpent was happening in all sorts of forms. And it was so great that I basically didn't really leave. I've sort of left now, but I haven't. It's still my home, Chicago, and mainly because the theater scene there, particularly in the mid 80s, was so fertile and verdant and lush and exciting and scary. And it was so many things. Perfect for an adrenaline junkie.
What was one of the most exciting things you were a part of in that time?
theatrically. uh, I would
Yes.
say
Okay.
'cause the revolution was very sort of revolutionizing for me in that way. Like, and I think it also sort of gave me a deep place of where I am in my life. Once you make the decision to stand in front of a tank,
Hmm.
um, you've put yourself in a life or death. You know, we talk about that of like what is life and death, choices and motivations and objectives in theater. But once you really sort of say, am I okay with doing this act that might not uh, end well for me? And everything else feels like gravy from there on out.
And you did that
I
in the
did that.
Philippines.
It was people power. So you started to hit the streets and try to prevent violence and stop tanks and with your bodies. It was just it was one of the revolutions that went well, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
The world aligns after that, right? That tells you who you are as a person.
Hmm.
So doing anything else seems a little easier after that.
Ah. Did it make you more fearless?
I don't know that it made me more fearless. What it has done is resolved me into living inside my choices
Hmm.
that particularly like big ones. I remember doing a negative story on that was a lesson on that was I was out there and I did a narration, a voiceover for a documentary called Never Again. And it was about a lot of the disappearances for those who opposed Marcos at the time, and a lot of the brutality that was going on among the citizenry. And I remember them asking me if I minded having my name attached to it. And I was like, so wrongly full of myself. It's like, sure, go ahead. And I also, here's the thing, I knew that I was getting on a plane in a few months coming back to America. But my name is not just my name. And that was a foolish act.
Hmm.
And, but because that revolution was like pretty much one person died, you know, it was sort of like daisies. It was sort of the model happy-go-lucky yellow, everything was a festival sort of protest in a way. Though there were moments of like the night I was there, it was the decision to stay was not because of politics, was because there were a bunch of old nuns linking arms, praying, and I wanted to be between them and the soldiers. And we
Hmm.
were told that a tank was coming at us, and we were instructed how to sit, how to wet our kerchiefs, how to cover our mouths. And then we heard that that another of our faction was at one of the other gates, and they were being attacked with tear gas and clubs, and we could hear it, and we were waiting for ours, and ours never happened. We found out later that the tank had got lost in the subdivision because they were kids from the provinces. They weren't city boys, and tanks weren't designed to go in subdivisions anyway. So it got stuck and it never came. And then a helicopter came, and that was the moment I was like, oh, this is bad. This
Hmm.
this was this is not going to be well. I just hope that I don't have to witness or experience too much brutality and that my death is quick. Or maybe even my citizenship. And, you know, there's shame to this of also saying I'm a US citizen, so maybe that might save me. But what about my friends, right? What about the nuns behind me?
So I want to go forward now to this fertile Chicago experience,
Yeah.
and were there moments in there, or in your experience with the Filipino repertory, um, in which you felt yourself opening and growing and being challenged as in your work?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like we often say in theater, you're only as good as your last show, right? Um, that I feel like if I look back on my resume and my life, a lot of them are links that are inextricably linked to something else, to another show, another experience, another person. It's very hard to uh, just pull it apart, but I see some links stand out at me more than others. And I think because we're talking about it in the Philippines, again, not a singer, not a dancer. My first production was, and I came in late, was Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And I was in a blonde wig and candy stepping and doing chorus. and I did, a lot of stuff outside what I was used to. And it was very fun to be able to play completely. And after being stifled for so long of like really getting to work in ways that felt, and I balk at this word, legitimate, not that I think the classroom stuff I did wasn't legitimate. I think I was doing true art, but there were not paying audiences. There were not, it's outside that. It's more the exploration. But that's definitely one of like where I was finding myself in that situation. And then just a couple years ago, I was at Arena doing, so lucky to be in Molly Smith's production of Anything Goes as Mrs. Harcourt. So I found myself like, my God, tap dancers, hats off to you people. That was really surprising to me. And I just had the best time. And it's funny because I do a lot of my stuff that I focus on is experimental or classical, but experimental that kind of pushes the edge. New works, a lot of, I'm an artistic associate of Looking Glass, which is a beautifully creative family of theater artists that primarily do new works. And anyone who's done one knows how hard that is, but to do a season 4 or 5 years of that, it's very impressive. They've added a lot to the theatrical canon. But, Looking Glass aside, there's just a lot of that happens in Chicago, and which was why I used to stay, because everyone was exploring different styles. I remember when I was there, New Crime, John Cusack's company, which was this commedia dell'arte with a band and, white makeup and 4 emotions, anger, hate, love, fear. And each time they would amp up. So they would repeat a line and it would get more and more. And I love that. And that wasn't something that I was in as much as those are the things I'm attracted to. Mary Zimmerman, my God, like she has taken up a big chunk of my life. So there's a lot of those experiences and they come at me so fast that I can't even get them to you fast enough, but those are a few.
This experimental work, this interest in new work and new ways of working, and maybe in gritty work or classical work in a new way. Was that something that you intentionally pursued, or was that part of the journey of one thing leading to another for you?
I think it's a combination of it being definitely a conscious preference, but also just my unconscious default, and I'm not sure which came first. Directors tend to gravitate to people who are, if you do that type of work and they do that, you're an automatic not an automatic shoe-in, but that room requires a different set of skills. And a lot of that isn't necessarily, it's a lot of room work. It's a lot of ensemble work. It's a lot of personality work. It's a lot of holding space work. It's a lot of learning how to communicate artistically that you feel right, but also not infringing on, not too loudly, whatever that is. How do you build together? And
you're talking about making new work?
New work, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even how do you reimagine, like it's important to hold space enough that that there's a more democratic way of creating, but also not holding dead space too. Like there's got to be a momentum to it. I think there is a nuance of it that you have to have the capacity to understand it, the heart to feel it, and the desire and the drive to motor it through. And I think that's how I end up in a lot of these rooms, because I like this theater, I pursue it. So I audition for a lot of things, but the things I get are the things I'm passionate about. So I don't know, maybe I'm not good at anything else, or maybe I don't fit. I don't know. I don't know what that is, except it's interesting. It's consistent enough. And I wouldn't say that that is so much now. I'm at that sort of beautiful grace where you sometimes just open an email and you have a job and you didn't have to audition for it. Um, but when you're 20 and you don't, that seems like a dreamland. Like that is not where you are. You're
Right.
trying to figure out how you fit in this world and how you make a living. And I uh, made this big decision in 1990, right after I had done a year-long project with Absolute Theater Company. We'd worked on our own adaptation of Three Musketeers, and it was a 2-night thing. It was sort of inspired by Nicholas Nickleby, which was a very big influence for me in college, seeing that was like, theater at the epicenter of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the theater I do now, which is I think it's a very Northwestern thing, but also I see it also very much from Frank and Mary and a lot of the Looking Glass, where that narrative is very open, that adaptation of, there's an acknowledgement of the audience and they're acknowledging that you're acknowledging them, as opposed to a lot of theater, you have that fourth wall that my favorite theater is the one where you get to pull the veil aside a little bit and really talk to people, because there's nothing like human connection. I mean, we've always known that. I think the pandemic has made that super clear to us. And that is, I miss that a lot. And I'm very lucky that I'm out in Ashland. It was because I was doing a show. I was here for 10 months, an all-female production of Bring Down the House by Rosa Joshi. And I was so excited. And it was, I've worked hard, and this was one of the hardest shows I worked for. We were all like beat. It was like kind of crazy what we were doing. It was very intensive, a lot of physical things. We were taiko drumming. It was like swinging broadswords. We were dressed in leather. We were badass. It was good, but it was a lot of very physical theater, a lot of fabric, a lot of chairs, a lot of choreography, a lot of choral speak, shared, and then also real scenes. And we opened and then we closed. And
because of the pandemic.
Yeah, because of the pandemic. And so I'm actually stranded out here on the West Coast, and I'm like, what am I going to do next? And it being Asian, it made sense not to do the drive back across America, particularly in March 2020. So I stayed in housing until we lost housing. And I mean, it really was sort of living on the edge in a way that I never had before. And I've, one of my cast members and the dramaturg, one of the things I realized early on is the way to weather this is through art, is to keep creating. So we sort of created a collective, like where I was before, with the building's called the Avalon, and we would have Upper Ave salons. There were four of us. We would read poems, we would paint our nails, we would read plays, and we would then do, which evolved into filming, zooming scenes together. And then we sort of created our own production company, and which has resulted in us producing a little something at Christmas. We did a Christmas carol, pero a little different. So it was a Spanish sort of a modern adaptation that we did. I was Scrooge.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mary Zimmerman and Frank, by whom I think you mean Frank Galati.
Yes.
What did you learn as an actor working with those directors?
You know, for me, they're almost synonymous with the Chicago theater. And for me, that snapshot is, the mid 80s, early 90s of all that work that was going on. And Frank Galati was definitely of that style, but all the directors of that time, everyone was coming here and really flexing their theater muscle. Like, you got some really hardcore people doing hardcore stuff. Steppenwolf sort of was born out of that. Looking Glass was born out of that. New Crime. Conquest of the South Pole. Famous store was that theirs? There was a small company. Some friends of mine had done Monumental Oak, which was like this whole fight choreo thing. And there's been so many great theaters, and a lot of that is, I think they're sort of a vanguard of that, but I can't mention them without also acknowledging that level of innovation and artistry is not limited to just the two of them. Though
Yeah.
everyone, honestly, those two are titans in terms of what that is and what they bring in. There's more that I'm almost scared to go down it for fear of by omission, because there's so much lush work being done in Chicago. It has been, and I think it is still. Though, it's interesting to talk to some of my younger compatriots, people who now play my sons, where their perspective is different from mine.
So it was a time of foment, a time of fomenting of creativity
Yeah,
and daring and
innovation.
scrappiness
Yeah,
and
yeah,
innovation. Yeah.
yeah. And I think,
Um,
and stories are just expanding. I feel like
hmm.
the stories we're telling and who's telling them is just so much more now.
In your experience as an actor, so acknowledging all this other great work that's happening in the city by many artists, but you're one of those artists, and I'm interested in what happened to you, what expanded in you, what changed in the way you saw your work, either working with Mary or Frank Galati or someone else in that time. Were there noticeable changes, or was it a period of just gradual accumulation of skills and deepening of your work?
I think you articulated that beautifully. I think that latter part has a lot of truth to it, that it has been a constant gathering and rehoning and articulating. But there's definitely surges from people you work with where you're like, that, whatever that moment was. And sometimes it's hard for me because I've experienced them in the room from being an actor or a director, or from the creative side. But I've also been an audience member where I've seen things that have just like really, like, I was like, I just learned so much from experiencing this.
Hmm.
And that's a constant thing, isn't it? I would probably say one of the most effective theatrical experiences I've had was one where I was an audience member, and I had the privilege of seeing In and of Itself, Derek Delgadio's beautiful piece that was off Broadway. And it is one of the most stunning pieces. Anyone in the arts, I think, particularly who does solo or any sort of performance, or that really trying to reveal yourself to the audience in a way, he does in ways that are just magical. And that's always sort of like, sometimes you see that and then you're also like, so the best piece in the world has already been done.
Well, listening to you you're in Oregon now.
I am.
You have spent a good chunk of your career in Chicago, but then I hear Louisville, I hear New York, I hear Philippines. You sound like a person who's very much in motion, um, which some actors' careers are built that way. And can you talk a bit about what that is for you?
It's intense. It is intense. Part of it was like, this is what I wanted. Monkey's paw. um, it's great, but it's a lot of work. I've sort of been slightly, I had an apartment in Wicker Park for 10 years. 10 years. And in 99, I gave it up because I was doing Metamorphoses. It was going on the road for 3 months or so. And I was like, now's the time to try a different city. I will go and land somewhere. And I landed in LA kind of, and then Metamorphoses got picked up to go off Broadway. And then we got there like August 2011, and then like a couple weeks later the world changed and we were in the midst of that, and our show sort of became a healing cultural point, I think.
Yeah, for
And then
sure.
we got a Broadway run for about a year out there. So I was out there, and then when it was time, it was like, I'll come. I think I have to go. My dad was uh, diagnosed with some things that let me know I had to be back in the Midwest.
Mm.
So I moved back to Chicago, and I went, got back, and immediately went on the road with some other things into a show, and then like I think it was Metamorphoses, like Cincinnati and St. Louis, which put me close to my dad, and then I took about a year off. And just did the drive between Chicago and St. Louis every couple weeks. Not bad. It's about 6-hour drives, but it's exhausting to do that constantly. And then just about the time I was like, well, maybe, I do have to kind of get back to work. And Looking Glass had asked me to audition for 1984. So, and this was 2004. So I took that and then just started working again. And, but I had been moving, like I wasn't in one apartment for a good kind of sense, in a weird way. So a lot of my stuff is still in storage from 2000. I've got boxes that I haven't opened of books. And so I have huge, it's like, oh, when this stops, but oddly, it just hasn't stopped. And I keep chasing it in a good and bad way.
What's the good?
The good way is you get to really explore the country. You get to see, I've been in Boston like for all 4 seasons. I've done like 4 shows there. I've done like 3 or 4 shows in DC, Berkeley, all seasons. It's like these places you get to live and experience. And our country is really fascinating. And artists are very fascinating. And there's a lot of similarities, but you just get access to things that your world just keeps getting bigger in a very exciting way.
And what are some of the bad things about
Uh,
life?
Jury duty, car insurance, health insurance, doctors. The logistics are a nightmare. My mail sometimes doesn't get to me. It's always care of. And, if someone gets it wrong, it's like, and you find out important things. I'm not on social media, so sometimes I don't find out things I wish I'd known sooner, about friends so I could support them or say goodbye to them. That is the one sort of, because you're just always at the end. But I have, I've got it down to a science. It's like I bring my bedding, I bring my wall hangings, I have a lot of fabric to cover for, if you look at all my places, they look similar because this is my lamp that has traveled with me. It rolls up, it unzips and rolls up, and it's been in like 12 different apartments. So I think the big move was in 1999, and then there was a lot of on the road stuff before then. But when you're located somewhere, that's not so bad. It's hard when you're not located and you're moving, which is what I've sort of been the last 8 years. I gave up my apartment in 2012 to come out here to OSF, ironically, to do Whitesnake with Mary Zimmerman, to develop that. And then it got picked up to go to Berkeley, and then Metamorphoses got picked up to go to Arena. So I drove across the country and hopped on a plane and was there, and then went back. And in the course of it, my mother passed on my birthday. So I shut the door on the place, and I've been going back and dealing with it in the interim. But the logistics are very hard, particularly when you are your own support group.
Yes.
It's a challenging lifestyle that way. The rewards are phenomenal, but there is a cost.
I end this with a little game. So the game or the questions are 3, 2, 1. 3 is 3 actors whom you admire and a quick reason why.
2 of my favorite Chicago actors and friends, Jenny Bacon and Chris Donahue.
What about Chris?
Chris is, he's one of the most generous actors, and he has a stillness and just sort of a natural ease about what he does, which is fascinating because he has great anxiety about that. Like, I think he never really trusts it, which is probably one of the reasons why he's also so good, is that he's not aware of how good he is.
What do
And
you
Ginny
admire
is
about-
and they've often done shows together. Like they were sort of like Mary's couple in many ways. And she's also someone who's, you just fall into what she's doing. And it's that, you're always looking for a moment of, you always have often a good connection with someone, but there's moments where everything kind of goes fuzz, like there's a hum that sort of happens. And I've had some really great scene partners that way. And I think it's also because I love watching their work too. And so I've loved them from either side of the lights. Someone who I've not worked with, let's see, it's standard, but Meryl Streep is really good. I've been pandemic watching a lot of her stuff.
She's not bad.
She's doing it, right? But that almost feels like a gimme. Let's go for something obscure. Philip Seymour Hoffman. I was always very impressed with his work. There was always something very truthful, and it just sort of perked up your ear and you went into it. Like, and everything he's Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and he's very different. It was very different, but yeah.
Great. 2. 2 is trick and treat. And the trick is a trick of the trade.
Okay, well, a trick is, and anyone who's worn capes or trains, you have to always be in real estate with the floor if you're going to the ground. And I found I even sort of patented my own sort of move, which was to lower myself on one leg so I could move fabric out. So when I stood up, you didn't have that awkward sort of like all over your, so you could lift out of it. I've created a career on working with fabric. Yeah, very, very Mary Zimmerman. It's very beautiful. It's very effective. You can get colors and it becomes clouds and water and everything else, but it is treacherous if it is underfoot.
What's the mechanics that you keep that material out of your way?
What you do is once you plant one foot, that foot never moves, because that way there's always contact between that foot. And then the other foot you can move around, curl behind you, then lower. And if you do a straight back lower, the fabric doesn't get underneath you as much. It sort of pulls out to the side. And then you can adjust as long as you then know where there's contact, but you always have to have what your push-up foot is going to be free of fabric, because if it's up higher, you can't go all the way up and you're caught in this, or you slip. So it's...
so you could either trip or slip, right?
Yeah. Or float up.
What's a treat? Something you still delight in?
Oh, this is, I love theater in the round because of the energy of the audience, but I also love a good proscenium, and I love it when a proscenium has the curtain drawn at the top. There's something about that is very old school and ritual and beautiful, and there's sort of like it's a weird mystery date. Like you can hear them on the other side, and there's that sort of anticipation for them. And this is something I did particularly when I left in 2012, which was you can go, particularly if you're not seen, you can go and feel the audience, particularly on student matinees. Like it is a palpable thing, the energy. And I sort of feel like an energy vampire. Like I would go and find where that hot spot of I don't know what it was, of a life force of people, this buzz. And it actually is, it's not just like I'm thinking about it. It's like I can feel the vibration. You can fine tune it to where you're like, and it's like getting a jolt. It's so unusual. It's so unlike anything that you can get anywhere else. I think it's just only people backstage behind curtains.
And that brings us to 1. One is something that you still aspire to, still want to learn, or something you'd like to achieve?
Oh, heck. That's easy. Everything, right? I don't know what's going to happen next. I never know. I was, I got to do Lear a few years ago. It was the backroom Shakespeare. It's like, that was never even on my radar of a possibility. And actually my friend Colin Spar was sort of spearheading that particular project and had been talking to me about it, and they've been talking about Mary Beth Fisher being a great Lear. And I was like, oh yeah, that'll be a great Lear. And they're like, do you want to do? And I was like, yeah, I would love to play opposite Mary Beth. I haven't, worked with her yet. And she couldn't do it. And he was like, so, and I was like already racking my brain of like, who could we think to fill Lear? And he goes, so do you want to do Lear? And I was like, oh, I have to say yes. You never say no to Lear. And yeah, I said yes. I know enough to appreciate it in the moment and after the fact, but I don't waste a lot of time on the what ifs, what could be's. I'm so focused on staying in the moment and still creating that's what always takes me to the next thing, right? So I've always daisy chained with myself to the next project. I've not stopped. And you can thank conservatory for making me very, very hungry. Like I was so hungry to do this that once it came my way, I did not stop gobbling. And for me, it really is the work. And what's weird is the work I choose to do is often ensemble. So it's not like I can bank on being my own product outside that. I've been lucky that people recognize there's a value to what it is I do, which is sort of ensemble theater, live theater. there's a career choice for you.
I've enjoyed your work on stage and have not had a chance to get to know you well. I think we've met in passing a couple of times.
Yeah, we talked about, I think we did a reading or a Chicago dramatist. Again, that's like, people are like, you still do readings and workshops? I was like, oh yeah, I do. You just don't know what's gonna, like, who wrote this script? There's always something to learn.
Well, that's clear in talking to you, that is how you approach the work and how you approach your life in the work. It's really exciting and inspiring to hear you talk about the work in that way, especially in pandemic times when we're all shut down and you're still finding ways to make interesting things happen for yourself.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your journey with me. And I just want you to know that I appreciate and admire the way you work.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very lucky. I have very little regrets of like the choices I made. I mean, there's a few things, shouldn't have eaten that, shouldn't have bought that, sure. But overall, it really is, if you love what you do, it's all good. It's all good.